What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus. We are here, the usual crew. We have the full crew today, so there's three of them that get to gang up on me again. Because if you guys recall last week, Daniel Kelley was not here with us, but alongside of me, I have Brandon, Marianne Lee. Brandon, how are you this fine morning?
I'm good. I got my coffee. I'm ready to go.
That's me too. I got coffee, and it's a good day. Daniel, how are you doing? Welcome back to the show. You enjoy your vacation?
Vacation. I couldn't make it because I was too busy last week. I don't think that counts. And now I have no coffee, so I'm behind in all sorts of ways.
I call shenanigans. My articles don't need any editing. You could have been here. Nathan, what's going on, buddy?
Not much. I'm doing well. If your articles don't need editing, my articles need plenty of editing, so I'll keep it busy if you're not.
I love it. Nathan, I've been liking those stats to know that come out almost I think it's on Friday they come out, the 30 stats to know. I've been enjoying those articles. If you guys haven't seen those, check them out. But guys, I wanted to start the show just to discuss where you guys were at in your season-long leagues, because it's coming to the time where we pretty much know if we're going to make the playoffs. We know if we're not going to. Nathan, how are you doing in the fantasy leagues that you're in?
Good. I kept myself to 5 leagues this year. Should make the playoffs in 3 of the 5. One of them's a league that I'm in with you guys where I purposely drafted all young players, so I was not expecting to make the playoffs whatsoever in that one, and then this injury bug hit me in the other one. Keenan Allen, Sammy Watkins as my early picks, and that's not going to end well. No,
that's tough, and especially there's a lot of injuries, and we're going to talk about them obviously on the show, but losing AJ Green right before the fantasy playoffs is brutal for any team. Daniel, how are your teams holding up?
Mostly, so-so. I'm definitely making playoffs in one, and I'm borderline in another. Problem is I have 3 Yahoo leagues, and I just looked at it this morning. In those 3 leagues, I've had the most, and second most points scored against me. So the fates have not aligned.
No, that's no fun. I know leagues like that. I know I'm in the Flex League draft with Pat Thorman, Mike Clay, and others from the industry, and I have the most points in that league, but I'm not in first place. It's quite frustrating, and it's not really even that close. I've been unfortunate. Brandon, I know you play in just about as many leagues as I do. How are you holding up?
Yeah, I think I'm in 15. I think I'll make the playoffs in 10.
Yeah, no, that's a good ratio.
Yeah. I mean, the other 5, again, injury bug. One in particular, the Scott Fishbowl, I'm just really ticked off about because they don't let you pick up until after week 1. And it's a 2-quarterback league, and I had both Tony Romo and Teddy Bridgewater. Mm-hmm. And so after week 1, I was like, dude, neither of these guys are playing. Literally, I need to get somebody. And then I went to get someone, and everyone decided to put all their money on Sam Bradford and Dak Prescott. So I didn't get them. So then I was like, what the what? I've been writing Bryce Petty and Alex Smith. I mean, it was useless. So sometimes you just have that happen. It was gone. It was over. I was like, there's no way. I still won 3 games though, somehow. Well, because I had DeMarco Murray. I had David Johnson. I actually had a great team. If I would have gotten those waiver wire picks, I probably would have won the whole darn thing. It's unbelievable.
Well, I think you should be happy, though, Brandon, because we're in a dynasty league together. 14 people from the industry. Nathan's in that league as well. And Brandon is sitting, I think, at 20-2 right now. We play doubleheaders every single week. Is that your record right now, 20-2? Is that what it is?
I believe so.
It's ridiculous. She's basically running away with the regular season, but Moore has predicted her to have a New England Patriots-type crash to her perfect season, one of which that I hope to be the one crashing that. Myself,
give me a break. Give me a break. I'll Brady all of you. Who do you want in clutch time? Brady.
Well, yeah, but he's also got tough matchups. Just wait.
I'm the one who said that in the preseason.
I know you did. But anyways, my leagues, so there's a lot that I'm teetering on. I'm in 15 leagues. I want to say I'm locked into the playoffs in 10 of them. In the other 5, I haven't been eliminated from any league. It's just I'm teetering where it's I'm 6-5, 5-6, right on that borderline. So there's still a lot of things to be made. So these waiver wires mean a lot to me. So let's just get into it. Let's start talking about it. As we always do every show, we start talking about quarterbacks and which ones you should stream, because at this point in the year, there's no quarterbacks worthwhile on the waiver wire. But if you're one of those people that plays matchups, it's important to you to know who you should stream. And it's funny because we have 2 people that are the highest on one player. We have another 2 players. Basically, we're all over the board because we have a cumulative ranking. So we each rank the players as we want to, and they're all even. So This week, we're all going to try and make our cases. So, Brandon, I'm going to start with you and Nathan because both of you like Sam Bradford at Detroit. This game will be taking place on Thanksgiving. I know there's a matchup in there I really do like, but tell me why you like Sam Bradford so much.
Well, you're also going to see that I'm higher on Adam Thielen than everyone else, too. I think that I like their passing game a lot. I hate their run game. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that, but their passing game has really picked up. And even with Patrick Peterson shutting down Stephon Diggs, they were able to generate yardage, move the ball around the field. I think that they're actually kind of finding their stride in that area. And not only that, but Cordero Patterson is even good for some big plays. So I just think that you can't get a better matchup than going up against Detroit as far as like being able to pass the ball, being able to move the ball down the field. So, I mean, I understand that, Darius Slay, we're hoping is a little bit better this week than he was last week. But still, I'm not intimidated by this defense. And I think they're going to have to throw the ball because they cannot run the ball, and that's Sam Bradford. So I don't love him. Don't get me wrong. This is actually, and I do want to say this about drafting, this is why I always pick two quarterbacks that are middle range so that you have like a Matt Ryan and a Matthew Stafford or a, what have you, because I like to play the matchups within two good quarterbacks so I don't have to deal with Sam Bradford. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I'm right there with you. In a lot of leagues, I drafted Tyrod Taylor and Matt Ryan. I felt like I would have been fine, and Matt Ryan kind of ran away with the job, so I was able to trade him away and get a top-tier wide receiver or a top-tier running back at that point. Nathan, is there anything else you want to add onto the Sam Bradford argument?
Sure. A big problem with the Vikings offense has been the offensive line this year. It's getting even worse with injuries, but Detroit doesn't have a pass rush, so the offensive line is not going to be as much of a problem as it has been in previous weeks. Bradford played the Lions not too long ago, passed for 273 yards, had a touchdown, so he was good last time he faced the Lions. And he's had at least one touchdown every game this season, so he should be at least good for that, where I'm not as sure about the other quarterbacks getting a touchdown.
I like where you're at on that. So basically, Sam Bradford, I think he is a good high floor option. And if you look at Detroit, they've allowed at least one touchdown in every single game, one passing touchdown in every game. They've allowed multiple passing touchdowns in 7 of their 10 games. So it's definitely a high floor option with Sam Bradford. I just worry about his upside a little bit. But one matchup I think they should exploit this week is Quandre Diggs. The slot cornerback for the Lions is going to match up with Stephon Diggs. The better Diggs is going to win there, and that's Stephon. So that's a good matchup. The one that I was highest on was Carson Wentz versus Green Bay. Daniel, now you have Kaepernick at number 1. So me with Carson Wentz, it's pretty obvious why I like Carson Wentz this week. It's just a matchup against this Green Bay defense that has allowed, I was just looking at this, they've allowed 30 or more points in 5 of the last 6 games. The only game they didn't, as I mentioned like every week now, is that it was Matt Barkley, who is now the Bears starting quarterback, it seems. This defense is just pathetic. They've suffered more and more injuries. I think they're down their top 4 cornerbacks now. It's a mess in Green Bay. There's nowhere to go. Teams are scoring plenty of points. Carson Wentz is at home. I just think this is a solid game considering Ryan Matthews isn't going to play. Darren Sproles is a little nicked up. He's got like a cracked rib. Why do you think that Kaepernick is a better play than Carson Wentz?
Well, I'm just looking at their standard fantasy points in the season. Sam Bradford has 0 games of 20-plus fantasy points. Wentz has 1. Tannehill has 1. Kaepernick has played 5 games and has 2. He only has 1 game of fewer than 17 points. When you're looking at these guys, you want the 2 things, and this is streamer, starter, whatever. You want a high floor and a high ceiling. Bradford has a high floor. Wentz has a high floor. Kaepernick has a high floor because of his legs. But if you're looking at ceiling, nobody has a higher ceiling than Colin Kaepernick, maybe across the league. For me right now, he's QB1 borderline, whereas the rest of these guys are QB2 in the 18 to 19 range. I was amazed I was the only one that had Kaepernick number 1. I thought he was an easy number 1 on this list.
I just think it's a grind-out sort of game for the 49ers and the Dolphins. I think that both of them want to run the ball. Chip Kelly came out today or yesterday and said that we're running our offense through Carlos Hyde again. Like, we need to get back to that, and rightfully so. Carlos Hyde looked fantastic last week. They were just against a much superior Patriots defense, or Patriots team, I should say. But Carlos Hyde looked really good. I do think they try and run him a lot more in this game. So Kaepernick, while he's got a rushing floor, me personally, I think that Carson Wentz offers the similar floor to him this week, and I think he offers more upside in passing the ball. Now, Brandon, you have Carson Wentz down at number 4 on this list. Tell me why you don't like him.
Numbers. I think that Wentz is not a good fantasy quarterback right now. It just is what it is. The guy hasn't gone over 15 fantasy points since week 5 in any format. So, well, actually, that's not true because if you only do -1 for fumbles, he actually did get 16 points last week. So at Seattle, but right now that's his ceiling. I think that what they're going to try to do is win this game by being conservative against this really porous defense rather than letting him, sling it around. I don't like the fact that he's been, the 45 pass attempts last week is absurd. 43 against Dallas. They won't need to do that this week. That's absurd. And they shouldn't. They need to get this guy back on track, and they need to get him to stop making mistakes and to be able to be a competent quarterback that we saw before the bye week. I just think that they're going to go with a smarter game plan this week against a team that they could possibly beat based on how bad their defense is. So
I just don't know if they have the running game essentially for what they want to do. And I agree with you that I think that they should control by running the game by running the ball, but I just don't know if they have the running back to do that with Ryan Matthews out, with Darren Sproles nicked up. I mean, you would be leaning on Wendell Smallwood, and I just don't know if we could bank on Wendell Smallwood carrying the ball 20 times. You know what I mean?
But he's not good at pass protection, so they're going to have to figure it out. They're going to have to get him to run.
Yeah.
So either he runs or he has to protect the quarterback, and I don't know which one they're going to lean on. I wouldn't lean on Smallwood protecting the quarterback.
All right. And so instead of having Brandon talk about her favorite player of all time, I'm going to go to Nathan. Nathan, what do you think of, it seems like Ryan Tannehill is in the middle of all of our rankings. Like none of us feel great about him, but none of us feel really bad about him against San Francisco.
Yeah, I think with him, he's had 6 touchdowns in the last 4 games, which is decent for the range of quarterbacks we're talking about right now. He hasn't been getting as many yards as he would like recently, but he is facing a 49ers team. They don't have a great pass rush. 49ers defense is a little bit better against the run, so Miami should have to rely on the passing game more. So he should get more volume than he's been getting. So I think he should be okay for a touchdown or 2 and 250-ish yards. So not a great option, but probably not a bad one either.
Gotcha. So, yeah, basically, I was just looking at that before. I actually just put Jay Ajayi, which is going to come out tomorrow morning, I believe, where my locks of the week and fades of the week. Jay Ajayi is in there as a lock. Going up against a San Francisco defense that over the last 3 games, they're allowing their opponent 76 plays per game. Ryan Tannehill hasn't thrown more than 34 passes since way back in week 3. So you're looking at 30 to 40 rushing attempts for the Miami Dolphins running game in this game. I got to like Jay Ajayi. Ryan Tannehill, I just don't know if he'll need to pass very much in the game. That's my concern with him. But so you guys heard all of our arguments on all the quarterbacks. You guys can kind of do with what you will there. But going on to running back, we have some more clear results that we're going to talk about. The first option being Wendell Smallwood, the one that we just talked about. So, Nathan, you're the only one that doesn't have him kind of near the top of your running back rankings. Is there something that you're seeing that we're not?
I just think we could be seeing Sproles and Matthews back fairly soon. I think Sproles said that he can play with his injury. Matthews, what I heard is he's day-to-day, so I could see both of them playing, if not next week, then the week after. So I think once that happens, Smallwood's going back to seeing a small part of the offense. I know his role has been increasing more than what it was in October, but he still isn't rushing for that many yards, even when he is getting the opportunity. So I think once Sproles and Matthews are back, I don't see a situation where I'm starting Smallwood. So that's why I'm less optimistic about him.
Gotcha. I mean, I think this is more about opportunity. So what we're looking for when we're picking up running backs at this point, I think that handcuffs might have more value than somebody that's going to be a 1-week starter, which is why I have Mike Gillislee as my number 1 pickup this week. I noticed that, Brandon, you're low on him. You're down at he's number 4 on your running backs. Me with Gillislee, basically at this point, I'm not looking to just carry on. I'm looking to win my fantasy league. So I'm looking for the highest upside option. And even though that Jerick McKinnon is on our list of waiver wire ads this week because he's under 50% owned, I would prefer to have Mike Gillislee. Even though he's not locked into carries right now, I think if something were to happen to LaShawn McCoy, Mike Gillislee would be a locked-in RB1, RB2 because the rest of the season they have a fantastic schedule. So, Brandon, is there something that you don't like about Mike Gillislee, or was it just like you just like the other options better?
I don't like his coaching. I don't like that they'll play LaShawn McCoy regardless of his injuries. I don't like the fact that they game plan around LaShawn McCoy to the point where if he doesn't play, they don't care that Mike Gillislee's out there. I just have some problems with the way that they are game planning when they think they may have to lean on Mike Gillislee. It seems like then they shift away from him, oddly enough. They almost play him more the healthier LaShawn McCoy is, which makes zero sense for me as a handcuff. So I don't really understand what they're doing there. I mean, I still have him as number 4. I think there are a lot of good pickups this week because there were a lot of injuries. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I still like him. I'm just a little bit dubious as to how they would use him moving forward. But yeah, I mean, this is a Rex Ryan issue for me, not a Mike Gillislee issue.
Okay, that makes sense. Daniel, you are with me on Gillislee. You think he's a good pickup. Another one that you like is Jerick McKinnon. Now, I'm a little weary on McKinnon. I noticed Nathan has him at number 1. Daniel, what worries you about McKinnon? Or is there something? Or do you believe that there's a reason he should be picked up?
I mean, anyone who has a job is worth a pickup. They let Ronnie Hillman go this week, so there's slightly less competition. One of the flaws in our whole ranking system here is a lot of the running back recommendations are going to come down to what you need. If you need someone to win this week, it's McKinnon or Smallwood probably, because they're the only ones who are going to have a job right away. If you want to stash someone for the playoffs, it's different. So for me, I looked at it as somebody I might need to win with right away, and McKinnon at least is going to get carries. They may not be great carries, but Matt Asiata is not getting great carries either, so they have to have somebody to carry the ball. And when you're comparing it to Charkendrick West, who's on our list, or Alex Collins, who's on our list, they're not guaranteed anything at all. So it's just a matter of workload.
Yeah, and Nathan, I know that you track snaps, and that's something I was looking at. And McKinnon has now played 64 snaps over the last 2 weeks compared to just 45 for Asiata. Is there a reason that you like Jerick McKinnon so much?
Oh, yeah, it's basically just because he's a starting running back, and none of the other guys that we're talking about are starting running backs. Snaps have been trending upwards each week. Like you said, Hellman was cut recently, so that's one less person to compete with for snaps. So he has a job. He hasn't been playing well all year, so if he starts all of a sudden playing well, then you have a good option since he's getting the playing time, and he's not going to get much worse. So we've probably seen the worst of him. Now we can maybe see the best of him.
Yeah. So now now the second option on your list, you and Brandon both have Alex Collins at number 2. So Nathan, I'll let you go first. Then Brandon, we'll get your take on Alex Collins. You guys both have him at number 2. Daniel and I are lower on him. I have him at 6. Daniel's got him at 5. So what about Alex Collins? Is it just the situation that he's in Seattle?
Oh, yeah, it's a situation. He's kind of the unknown of this group since we've kind of seen what some of these other players can do. Where Collins, he's in a situation where Seattle, 2 of their other running backs got hurt, so just him and Rawls. And even last year, Seattle had some issues at running back when Rawls was the number 1 guy and didn't really have other players on the roster that they liked, and they still, at most, played him for 2/3 of the snaps. So that's 1/3 of the snaps that should be going to someone else. At this point, it looks like it's Collins, so we should get an opportunity to see what Collins can do. And if he does a good job, then he might be seeing more than 1/3 of the snaps.
Gotcha. Now, my concern about him is that he wasn't even active last week. They had Tremaine Pope active over him. So that's my concern there. Like, they weren't obviously high enough to keep him active on the game day roster. Brandon, why are you so high on Alex Collins? Is it similar to what Nathan was saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, with CJ Prosize's injury, that just to me bumps up Alex Collins. Pope again is I believe he's a special teams player as well, or right. And so like his activation didn't really bother me too much. So I just think they're going to bring Alex Collins back in now that Prosize isn't there. To me, it's just kind of a completely different situation now. Again, I think that this is a handcuff that they're going to have to use. Thomas Rawls is coming off of injury, you guys. He could get re-injured and no one would be shocked. And so then they'd have to play Alex Collins, period. So he is 1.5 step away from being a starting running back. So that's why I put him up there, because they're running out of people, period.
Yeah, I think at this point they might be regretting letting go of Kristen Michael. It just didn't make sense to me why they needed to cut him right then and there. Obviously, they felt good about Rawls' health, but now in the situation that they're in, I don't know. A couple other names that are on the waiver wire list this week would be Paul Perkins and Charkandrick West. I think Charkandrick West, the reason that I put him in here was because I think he's one of those options that you just give him upside. Like, he's just basically, if something were to happen to Spencer Ware, he's strictly a handcuff. He has no standalone value. Whereas Paul Perkins, he's someone that if you're looking for a desperation option in your flex, I suppose you could throw him in there. But I think he's actually finally got the number 2 job on lock. So if anything were to happen to Rashad Jennings, I think that, Paul Perkins wouldn't be necessarily a bad guy to have on your bench in a high-scoring Giants offense. So you guys can do with that what you will. Okay, now that I can talk, now let's get a word from our sponsors. All right, guys. So now that we are done talking about streaming quarterbacks, we're done talking about running backs. Let's talk about the position of the week that seems to be the biggest one. The biggest week at the wide receiver position, because there were a lot of injuries. We had A.J. Green go down. We had Robert Woods go down. It's just become kind of a mess at the wide receiver position. There haven't been too many, and that's kind of something I noticed. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. I feel like this year there weren't too many standout waiver wire pickups that can win you your fantasy league. Like Cameron Meredith may have been a guy that popped up on there, but are we at the point now where we feel like adding someone like Tyler Boyd gives you the best chance to win your league? Daniel, you have him at number 1, so explain why you feel Tyler Boyd is going to take the leap into startable status.
Part of it is what you said. There's not been that one obvious pickup all year long. I have one of my leagues where I still have all my fab because I've been waiting on something significant, and there just hasn't been anything significant. Boyd, we saw when Green went down. Boyd's going to have the higher upside of the two Bengals receivers, him and Brandon LaFell. I think both of them are must-adds. But at this point, you're just going for upside, and of the guys who are out there, I think his is maybe the highest.
Well, my concern with him is that he hadn't scored a touchdown until this week, and it was a great matchup. The Buffalo Bills had just benched Nickel Roby, who had played fantastic at the start of the year, but they decided to bench him after playing horribly over the last couple of weeks. So I think the matchup called for him to be almost the guy that reaped the benefits this week. I still do think that Brandon LaFell is probably the one I would rather own. I just think he's the bigger end zone threat. We saw him scoring with A.J. Green in the lineup. Everything slowed down for Brandon LaFell once Tyler Eifert came into the lineup. So I think it's like addition by subtraction for Brandon LaFell in the top, and the fact that he's a red zone option for Andy Dalton. But the number 1 option for all of us except for Daniel is Pierre Garçon. Brandon, do you want to talk about Pierre Garçon and why you feel like he's a solid addition this week?
Because my man Kirk Cousins is coming to town. Hello, Kirk. How are you today? No, listen, I think that right now they are passing the ball effectively. Obviously last week he caught 6 of his 7 targets for 116 yards and a touchdown. But actually, when you look at his game log, he's actually had 6 receptions, 3 games in a row. That is a very high floor that we're talking about here. And we're talking about 67, 81, and 116 yards. Now, this doesn't take away from the fact that I am a Jamison Crowder believer, supporter forever, lifetime. But together, they're actually doing very well. And even with Deshaun Jackson being back, they are still targeting him. He's incredibly reliable. So I think they've just kind of gotten into a rhythm going out here in Washington. And by the way, this is because my other man, Rob Kelley, is a decent running back. So they finally can now run the ball and pass the ball. Whenever you're able to balance out your offense, everybody is, a beneficiary of that. And certainly Pierre Garçon is one of them. So you just can't deny. And in fact, actually, if you look at it, 4 of his last 5 games have been 6 catches. He's had 6 catches now in 5 games so far this season. Listen, 5 catches in 3. It's very consistent. This is not going away, and I'm almost embarrassed that we haven't talked about him till now.
No, I agree. He's a name I've been keeping an eye on because, when you pay attention to DFS, you look for kind of those really, really cheap guys that are cash game options. And with the targets he's been seeing, he's seen at least 6 targets in all but 2 of his games. He's being targeted. One of the games that he wasn't targeted very much was back when Josh Doxson was active and actually in the lineup. So, I think Pierre Garçon is finally entering that territory where if you're looking for a high floor option in that passing attack, I don't see anything against it. And I know it looks like Nathan agrees. One player that I want to talk to Nathan about, because he's higher than everyone else, and it's not really even that close, is that he likes Tagliere Sharp as a pickup this week. If you can't get Pierre Garçon, that he wants you to go to Tagliere Sharp. My concern, Nathan, I'll let you give your rebuttal here, is that I think Marcus Mariota and the Titans offense is headed into a dark place. He's had hold on. He's had a great part of his season. I get it. But now they're headed into Chicago to play against a Bears team that's allowed just 17 points per game at home. We know that they've lost a couple players in their defense. So this week may not be the best. Like, it's not the worst week for them. But after that, they still have their bye week to get out of the way. They will be playing against Denver, and then they will travel to Kansas City and Arrowhead Stadium, which we know Kansas City is tough to play. And, we're talking about Denver and Kansas City in the first 2 weeks of the fantasy playoffs. That's my only concern, but I am encouraged to see what you have to say about Tagliere Sharp. That might just change my mind.
Yeah, first off, I want to go back to Pierre Garçon for just a quick second. Yeah. Part of why I like him as well is because his matchups around the fantasy playoffs are very good. He plays Carolina around there, Chicago around there. Both teams who don't have good pass rushes. Trent Williams will be back, so Washington's offense should be on fire when you need him the most. But going back to Sharp now, he's been doing really well recently. He started to be the player that we thought he was going to be at the start of the season, seeing 58, 68, 68 yards recently, touchdowns in each of his last 2 games. He's the clear-cut number 2 wide receiver for them now. So while Rashard Matthews is still doing well, the top coverage is going against Matthews, so Sharp's seeing not as good coverage as he was seeing before. And I think he does have tough matchups. I wouldn't want to play him against Denver, but I think very late in the season, fantasy championship time, when you need someone the most, I think he's someone that can be there for you then.
No, that makes sense. And sometimes that's what you got to look at, is see if, like, you're being the number 2 wide receiver on the team, like him, like Pierre Garçon, they're not going to see the top cornerback on the opposing team, which definitely plays into their favor. Daniel, let's talk about your number 3 option. Both you and Nathan actually have him at number 3, and that's Marquise Lee. Why should we believe in hobbled Blake Bortles throwing to Marquise Lee?
Because hobbled Blake Bortles has been fine for fantasy. I mean, he's horrible in real life, but we don't care about real life. Receivers in Jacksonville produce. Allen Hurns has faded a little bit while Marquise Lee has come on this season. He's at 544 yards and finally got his first touchdown. That's wholly respectable last starter or flex play consideration fantasy production. The problem with Marquise Lee, I said it a couple weeks ago out here, he's never been healthy. He's finally healthy. He has 6 or more targets in all but 2 games this season. He has 50-plus yards in 5 of his last 6. There's nothing not to like as far as I'm concerned, other than it took him a while to score. Now he's scored. I can't say he's going to keep scoring now that he's done it. It's not like giving someone a taste for human flesh or whatever. That was a weird analogy. But I don't know why we wouldn't like Lee.
Well, for me, it comes down to Blake Bortles and the fact that in the fantasy playoffs, what we want one of 2 things. We either want consistency, at least know what to expect from a player. A player like Pierre Garçon, where he may not have the highest ceiling, but we at least know what we're getting out of him. Whereas, or you want a really high upside option. I don't think Marquise Lee is either of those. I don't think that he can offer you a 100-yard, 2-touchdown game to win you a fantasy championship. I don't think that he's safe to plug into lineups that you can guarantee, 60, 70 yards out of him every single week, like you kind of can with Pierre Garçon at this point. Their schedule coming up is also brutal. They're playing against at Buffalo versus Denver versus Minnesota, at Houston, and then versus Tennessee to close the season. So it's going to be a rough ride for Blake Bortles and that Jaguars offense as far as I'm concerned. One player I wanted to discuss with all you guys. So, Brandon, let's talk about this. Will Fuller is now available in more than half of Yahoo leagues, so he fits our criteria. But he's like the cumulative 5th or 6th option between us. So why is it that you wouldn't want to pick up Will Fuller?
Brock Osweiler is struggling. Last night actually was one of his better games. And certainly, I mean, you don't want to blame the refs, but wow. I am still reeling, I think, from last night's game, because I was like, what is happening? Mind blown. The problem is that he only has 1 catch in 3 of his last 4 games. when he's actually been healthy. Because the other problem is he's been unhealthy. So, yeah, that's why. I mean, listen, the guy has obviously a ton of speed, right? When he goes down the field, it's just beautiful. And there's a lot of potential with a capital P there, which is fine. But right now in this offense and the way that they're operating, I don't see a whole lot of upside there. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 4. Sure, he had back-to-back 100-yard games to start the season. And again, the talent is there. There's no doubt about it. But this offense is just not firing on all cylinders. They have to lean on the run. They have to lean on those short passes. I think CJ Fedorowicz is probably the number 1 pickup of the week as far as I'm concerned. It's very clear that guy is how they're running their offense. Even when he drops the ball, they're like, screw it, we're going back to him. So, I mean, they just don't care. It's short passes, it's running, and that's just not Will Fuller's game. So, and then I'm sorry, DeAndre Hopkins owners, that ref call, really, I know, I'm sorry.
I think if you're looking for like a high upside option, I think you could do worse because as I mentioned, when you're in the fantasy playoffs and if you're looking for either a safe floor or high upside guy, I think Will Fuller is the guy that I might grab just because you look at his upcoming schedule, starting in week 13, he gets the Packers, then he gets the Colts, and then in week 15, the second week of the fantasy championship, leading up to your fantasy championship, he plays the Jaguars. So the matchups are really, really good upcoming for him. So, I mean, if you're looking for someone like you're desperate, say you lost AJ Green and your bench is just you have nothing. Yeah. I think that Will Fuller could be a decent guy to grab there.
I will say, though, fantasy football is all about your other options. So, of course, there are definitely places where you're going to want Will Fuller. I will say, though, he only had 1 catch against Detroit and Oakland, and those aren't exactly bad matchups either. So I would temper the expectation that the matchups are going to help just because – I mean, listen, again, if you lost AJ Green, you're desperate. You do you. But I just also want to be real, 1 catch against Detroit, 1 catch against Oakland. That's tough stuff.
Yeah, come on. Will Fuller has 7 catches and 66 yards since week 4. He's missed some games there, but that's 4 games with less than 2 catches per game, and he's being targeted by the 3rd worst quarterback starting right now, the 4th worst. Brock Osweiler is horrible.
I think the only thing
he has. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Jared Goff was terrible, but we'll see. He's down near the bottom of the list.
It's a tough fight.
So. It's a guy who he can't throw deep. Also, all he has is these dump-offs to Fedorowicz. I like Will Fuller's talent. If you told me Dynasty, I'd invest in him long-term, but that's all predicated on him not having Brock Osweiler throw him the ball. I don't think he has any ceiling right now.
Osweiler used to be able to throw deep. He's not good at throwing into coverage.
No,
that's his problem with DeAndre Hopkins, right? Hopkins is all about winning the matchups, right? So you have to throw over the shoulder kind of throws, and that's his specialty. Whereas Will Fuller, all the way open down the field, used to be like, oh, great, that's good for Brock. Now his confidence is gone. He can't even do that.
You know what's funny?
He graded poorly as a deep passer for us last year, too.
He did. Well, that's the thing is, so I knew that because I there was an article I did this offseason about Osweiler and how he just wasn't very good at the deep ball efficiency. I felt like it didn't fit. I feel like the draft pick of Will Fuller didn't fit what Brock Osweiler's talent was, which we perceived to be, which that's also gone too. And I even watched the first week of the Bears because that's obviously my Bears. I was watching that week, Houston versus the Bears, week 1. And even though Will Fuller had a great game, I felt like Brock Osweiler was literally throwing his body in such a weird way to get the ball deep that it couldn't continue throughout the season. So I was concerned, but I do think that the Packers can be burned deep. I do think that he's not going to see Jalen Ramsey against the Jaguars. The number 2 receivers have been doing better against them. So it's just like a dart throw. But before we kind of move on to the tight ends, Brandon, you have Adam Thielen the highest of us. You have him over someone like Will Fuller. Tell us why Adam Thielen is someone you would look to pick up.
Yes, I do. He's playing in 60% of the snaps, which is about the same as everyone else. I mean, Diggs is playing in 74. Cordell Patterson's playing in 60%. He is, you guys, this is a constant thing for him. Every single week, you guys giggle when I bring up Adam Thielen, and he continues to produce. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. The Minnesota Vikings don't have choices. And Adam Thielen is actually doing a good job. He caught all 5 of his targets. He is actually a reliable target for Sam Bradford, and they've been getting him more and more involved as the seasons progress. I think that he really earned some brownie points when Diggs was out and he was a superstar. And I think that they're sticking with him. If you are someone that has lost AJ Green, I actually think he is the most dependable option moving forward. And again, they can't run the ball. And right now, Sam Bradford has the second fastest release right now, 2.19 last week, because they just know they have to get the ball out of their hands. Well, where do they do it? They put it in the slot. And where was the slot? Diggs and Thielen are sharing that position, and they're splitting the coverage. So I think it's actually a very interesting play, and I think that this is not a one-trick pony. Look at his game log, you guys. This is who he is. So it's a pretty solid floor.
I worry about the upside, and I think the matchup with Stephon Diggs versus Patrick Peterson this week kind of played in his favor. There's still just been one game this year where he's had over 68 yards, and if you guys recall, that was the week where Stephon Diggs was out of the lineup. So I don't think there's enough for two passing options in this Minnesota passing attack. I think they want to try and run the ball, even though they can't. I understand what you mean about a high floor option. I do get that. I just worry about his upside a little bit. And the last one we had down here was Anquan Boldin. I think that we all probably on the same page there. He's just like a guy, if you need to toss someone in your lineup because you're looking for a touchdown, just like as a last-minute guy, you could toss Anquan Boldin there. He's scored, I think, in half of the games this season.
But he's getting more targets than Marvin Jones.
He did this past week. He actually saw the most targets on the team. He doubled everybody, as a matter of fact. He had 8 targets, and Golden Tate was next with 4, I think, among wide receivers. So I don't know what they're doing. Actually, Nathan, let me ask you about that. Wait, so what is going on with Marvin Jones? Like, have you tracked any of those games? Do you see what's going on? Is it coverage? Is it just them not designing plays to go his way? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, I haven't been paying enough attention to Lions games, so I don't have a good answer there.
That makes sense.
It's what we've always said. ADOT for Matthew Stafford is always low. He does not throw the ball down the field. We said this wrote tons of articles about this in the preseason. I was like, this is not going to happen. This is not Matthew Stafford's game. We get on Alex Smith for this, but really Matthew Stafford has the same stats, you guys. Go back and look. He does not throw the ball down the field, and that's where Marvin Jones is. So
Brendan's right, though. Like, Matthew Stafford is, like, a lot of people give a lot of crap to Alex Smith about him not throwing the ball down the field. Matthew Stafford almost never throws the ball down the field anymore without Calvin Johnson. So, yeah, that's tough. But let's talk about some tight ends. Every week we talk about this guy. I don't even know if we need to talk about him anymore at this point because it's our cumulative number 1 tight end this week, and it's really not that close. CJ Fedorowicz. He's still just 22% owned. Like, what does this guy have to do to get you guys to notice him? Like, I just don't get it at this point. Like, I don't think we need to talk about him because you guys can go listen to, like, the last 3 episodes where we've been talking about Fedorowicz. His numbers continue to be there. He's that safety valve. He's the one guy in this offense that's been consistent. I don't think we need to talk about that anymore. My question to you, though, Brandon and Daniel, you guys are hating on Jared Cook. Now, hold on.
Yes.
Let me pause. Because I don't like Jared Cook as a player. I think he's been overrated for a long, long time. I didn't like him when he went to Green Bay. I felt like, I was sure that he's a better talent than Richard Rodgers. But I also didn't think that Aaron Rodgers would be throwing the ball 50 times a game like he is. I didn't think that he'd be, on pace for one of the best fantasy seasons of all time because of all these attempts that he's doing. So that leads me to believe that there's plenty of pass attempts to go around, and the Packers, over the last couple of weeks, they've started to target the tight end a lot, Richard Rodgers and Jared Cook. I know he's not very good. I get it, but opportunity screams points. It seems like Nathan is with me on this one, but I got to hear from Daniel. Daniel, you start first, and Brandon, you're going to both try and talk me off of Jared Cook.
I never thought I'd have to talk someone off of Jared Cook. It's Jared flipping Cook. He had 53 yards in the season before this game. It was, granted, he was hurt for a while, but hurt and not effective is the story of Jared Cook's career. The entire argument in his favor is he finally has a good quarterback throwing in the ball. And sure, Aaron Rodgers will throw the ball a lot. Aaron Rodgers will throw the ball a lot to Jared Cook and Richard Rodgers and Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb and Ty Montgomery and Devontae Adams. There's sort of 7,000 targets in that offense. I wouldn't use Jared Cook if you paid me money.
If you paid me money. Brandon, tell me about your hatred of Jared Cook and why is he so low on your list?
I retweeted Jamie Eisenberg of CBS, and he had the tweet that really summed up my feelings about Jared Cook and his career. He said, everybody's going to pick up Jared Cook this week, and everybody's going to be disappointed in Jared Cook next week. This is his one big game per season has just happened. This is who he is, you guys. This is every week. Usually it's in week 1, though. That's the disappointing part this time, right? It's usually week 1 and everyone picks him up. And then we're like, yeah, Jared Cook. And then it's, sledding downhill from there. My thing is exactly, if we're going to talk statistically what's going on here, he did play in 61% of the snaps this week, 43 out of 70. That's good. But when it comes down to target distribution, I think that this particular game really opened it up for him against Washington. They had to throw to catch up, especially towards the end there, because Washington all of a sudden just ran away with it in the third quarter. So this was a very game script game for Jared Cook, in my opinion, that I think favored him, because obviously Josh Norman never goes into the slot. There were very, particular things going up against Washington that opened it up for Jared Cook. Yes, they are targeting their tight ends more over the last couple weeks. My problem with the Green Bay Packers in general is that this entire season, they've gone up and down as to how they're calling each game. There is no consistency as to who the target is, whether they're going to run the ball, pass the ball, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's like a free-for-all for Aaron Rodgers, but they're not winning games letting him have 500 pass attempts. They're going to have to figure something out. They're going to get Christian Michael involved. That's going to be a Hail Mary, and they're just going to try to run and see what they can get out of this guy. I just think that this offense is shifting a lot right now, and so I don't think they're going to depend on Jared Cook on a consistent basis. And if you're going to talk about high floors or high ceilings, then you know what? You should be taking Vance McDonald, because this guy scores a touchdown all the time. There are other people that are dart throws that have been healthier and less of a disappointment. And again, I think the health issue for Jared Cook keeps popping up its ugly head, right? I don't think there's a consistent basis for him to be healthy either. So I understand 60% of snaps is encouraging, but I am concerned. There are a lot of concerns with this Green Bay offense in general.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. And that's the thing is, like, you mentioned the Green Bay offense and how it's been so unpredictable. Like, Ty Montgomery was left for dead, and then last week they started using him again. I get it, but what I was looking at is the fact that over the last 3 weeks, it's been really consistent what they've done to the tight end position. Aaron Rodgers has now targeted the tight end position 34 times in the last 3 games. That's netted, 22 receptions, over 230 yards, and a touchdown. So that's more me. This week, actually, it's funny because people might pick up Jared Cook, and then you might want to drop him after this week, because they are playing the Eagles, who actually play against the tight end extremely well. That Doug Peterson comes from the Andy Reid coaching tree. They just traditionally stop tight ends. So this week may not be the week you'd be excited to start him. But
then they have Houston, then they have Seattle. It's tough sledding.
No, it's not the easiest thing, but I'm just more banking on the fact that Aaron Rodgers is throwing the ball a ton, and at tight end, it's been a really volatile position to begin with. Daniel, you have Vance McDonald at number 2. So you like Vance McDonald just as much as Brandon does. What is it about Vance McDonald that makes you happy?
More or less what Brandon said. He's a dart throw, but I think he has a better shot at a touchdown than anybody on this list other than Fedorovich. It's a flyer, but at tight end, it's always a flyer, and he's surrounded by the fewest other weapons.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is with Vance McDonald, it was always very volatile production. He relied on the big play, but now he's seen at least 5 targets in each of his last 4 games. He saw 6 targets in 3 of the last 4. So Vance McDonald is finally starting to get the targets. It helps that Torrey Smith is dealing with some injuries, and that they don't really have a wide receiver in their wide receiver core that you can rely on. So Vance McDonald is interesting to me. Nathan, down here at number 4, you have Ladarius Green. There's definite concerns here. Let's hear why you have him down at number 4.
I have him at number 4 because I don't like the other options even more than I don't like Green. Green, I was sad to see he only had 8 snaps this past week. You would hope that he'd see a progression of snaps going up each week rather than going down. So I'm definitely less optimistic about Green than I was a week ago. But the other options are Will Ty, and has more opportunities now than he had before, but he's been doing really poorly with those opportunities. He's done a terrible job run blocking. He's been dropping passes, dropped 3 passes over the past 2 weeks, just 1 game this season over 50 yards. So I could see his playing time getting taken away just as fast as he received it. with how poorly he's playing, and then Lance Kendricks is Lance Kendricks. So.
Yeah, I agree. Lance Kendricks is Lance Kendricks. That's the best way to describe the Rams tight end position. For me, yeah, I'm with you, Nathan. That's the number one gripe I had with Ladarius Green. I felt like he could strive in that Cleveland matchup, but when I looked at the game logs afterwards and saw that Jesse James was still playing basically all the snaps, and Ladarius Green actually went down from in week 10, he played 12 snaps and he went down to 8 snaps this past week. So it was definitely frustrating. Brandon, you're a little higher on Will Tye. Explain. Let's hear your reasoning on Will Tye before we kind of wrap this thing up.
Oh, man. I just think that if you're looking for a dart throw, because that's what all of these guys are, save CJ Fedorowicz, which, again, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? This is like, remember for how long we were talking about Jamison Crowder before people would pick him up? I was like, what do you need? What do you need, people?
Cole Beasley was
Cole
another
Beasley. One. Call me. Listen, I think that this guy is highly ineffective, just like Nathan said, but I don't think they have a whole lot of choices. And this is a high-powered offense, or they're trying to be going into what they're hoping is going to be a playoff run. I just think that there's going to be more opportunity for him and a little less indecisiveness than a lot of these other tight ends. Not a lot. I mean, I have him ranked 3. It's, I just think Lance Kendricks is not great at football and playing for the Rams with Jared Goff. I think Jared Cook is, again, just a one-game pony and has been his entire career. And Ladarius Green, as far as I'm concerned, I don't even know why we're talking about him. So that's the only reason I have him at 3. Don't get me wrong, I'm not excited about Will Tye, but desperate times call for desperate measures. That was his first touchdown of the season last week, you guys. You can't expect that moving forward. But he did have 5 catches the week before, 4 the week before that. It's tough sledding out there. Gary Barnidge is, now that, there's so many injuries for that quarterback position, you just can't rely on him. There are a lot of inconsistent tight ends out there, so I could understand taking a chance with Will Tye.
I like it. I think we should title this episode "Desperate Times Call for Desperate Measures."
Yeah, seriously.
Let me jump in on Tye a little bit. They finally got away from Larry Donnell. He was inactive, a healthy scratch this past week, and his usage has been fading. Until 3 weeks ago, Tye had been averaging 3.5 targets a game. He's been averaging 6.5 the last 3 weeks. The last 6 weeks last year, when he had the job all to himself, he had 7 or more fantasy points 5 of the 6 weeks. When he has the job to himself, he produces. It's still a dart throw because there's so many other options on the Giants roster. But he has a higher ceiling than a lot of the guys we've talked about. For me, I have no problem investing in him if I'm desperate.
Well, yeah, for me with Will Tye, I think it comes down to, like you said, all the options that they have there. I don't think they've ever had this many options in the passing game. Whereas Eli Manning, last year it was kind of Odell Beckham and Ruben Randle. So I think that's the reason that Tye was able to have some of the games that he did. But I don't know, like you said, desperate times call for desperate measures. And if you're looking for a tight end, you could definitely do worse than Will Tye. I'm 100% on board with that. But guys, this is going to wrap up this episode of the Waiver Wire Show. You guys want to go ahead and hand out your Twitter handles. So if anybody has any questions as to, maybe the order that you'd suggest picking them up, you can give it to them. So Brandon, go ahead. What's your Twitter handle and where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Brandon Her FFB, as in Her Fantasy Football, on Twitter.
And Daniel?
I'm at Daniel T. Kelley, and that's Kelly spelled the same way as Fat Rob spells it.
I love it. Nathan, what's your Twitter handle?
PFF_Nate Jahnke. That's PFF_NATEJAHNKE.
Perfect. And I am at Mike Tagliere, NFL. We look forward to seeing you guys next week for another edition of Waiver Wire on the Fantasy Slant. Until next time, lights out.